All right, let's dive in. Today, we're turning our attention to pretty significant policy announcement coming out of Washington.
Yeah.
President Trump has unveiled a new set of travel restrictions. It's a move that brings back a familiar policy approach from his previous term, but maybe with a new scope, affecting quite a range of countries.
That's right. And our mission today really is to cut through the noise and help you understand exactly what these restrictions mean based only on the details we have from the sources.
Okay.
We're going to unpack which countries are included, the specific reasons the administration is giving for, putting them on the list, and how this stacks up against previous measures.
So, sort of an essential guide to the key facts.
Exactly. Just the facts from the announcement.
Okay, so let's get right to it then. The core action here is a presidential proclamation. It suspends or restricts travel to the U.S. for citizens of our levels. How many countries did you say in total?
19 countries are impacted by this. But it's important to note the policy involves different levels of restriction. It depends on the country.
19. Wow. Okay, that's a substantial list. And there's a specific timeline for this to kick in.
Yes, this is scheduled to go into effect on Monday, June 9th at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay.
And one detail that's been highlighted is that this isn't quite as immediate as the 2017 ban. Remember that?
Oh, right. Yeah.
There's a few days' notice built in this time, which likely aims to avoid some of that instant disruption we saw before.
Right, giving people maybe a moment to process, hopefully. Now, you mentioned different levels of restriction across these 19 countries. You said the information breaks this down into two categories. What are those?
Precisely. So there's one category of countries facing what's described as a full ban on nationals seeking to travel to the U.S.
A full ban. Which countries are those?
That list includes Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen.
Okay.
That's 12 nations where nationals are, broadly speaking, prohibited from entry under this new policy.
12 countries with a full ban. And the second category?
So the remaining 7 countries are subject to, let's call them heightened restrictions, but not a total ban on all travel.
Got it.
Those countries are Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela.
Uh-huh.
The specific restrictions for these nations might vary a bit, but it basically means more stringent screening and tougher criteria than the standard procedures.
Okay, so definitely not a one-size-fits-all policy across the 19. You've got 12 facing a full ban, 7 facing these heightened restrictions. Now, the really critical question, and where we need to maybe dig into the justification presented, is why these specific countries? What reasons does the proclamation actually give?
Well, the overarching reason cited is, maybe unsurprisingly, national security interests.
Right.
However, the proclamation does get quite specific, detailing a real mix of concerns. Some seem unique to different countries or, groups of countries.
And it sounds like it's not just about terrorism concerns, is it? The reasons seem to cover, a broader spectrum, things about a country's ability to cooperate or meet U.S. standards.
It's exactly right. The information points to about 3 main types of issues cited in the proclamation. One set of reasons revolves around a country's capacity for, let's say, governmental function and cooperation.
Okay.
This includes worries about a lack of competent or cooperative central authority, someone who can issue reliable passports or civil documents.
The documentation aspect.
Yeah, or to implement effective screening and vetting procedures that the U.S. deems necessary. This specific category of concern is cited for Afghanistan, Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Libya, and Venezuela.
So essentially, difficulties in verifying who people are and doing thorough background checks from those places makes sense. What's the second major justification then?
Another significant factor mentioned, and this for a pretty large group of countries, is high visa overstay rates.
Overstays.
Yes. This is cited as a reason for including Myanmar, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Burundi, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, and Turkmenistan. So that suggests a focus not just on who enters, but also on compliance with visa terms once they're actually here.
That's a really interesting point, connecting entry restrictions directly to overstay rates. And then, is there also a security angle explicitly tied to terrorism or state sponsors of it?
Yes, definitely. Terrorist activity or designation as a state sponsor of terrorism is the third category of justification listed.
Okay.
This is specifically cited for Iran, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, and Cuba. So you see, it's a mix. Some countries seem to be on the list for vetting concerns. some for overstays, some for terrorism links.
And some for multiple reasons, it sounds like.
Exactly. Some seem to be cited for more than one of these issues.
It's a layered justification presented in the proclamation. And the process leading up to this, did the information mention how this came about? Was there a specific order?
That's right. This policy didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's stated as the result of a January 20 executive order. That order directed a security review of what they called high-risk regions to identify countries that were deficient in providing vetting information.
And I think I saw something about a connection made by President Trump himself to a recent event.
Yes, that's mentioned. In a video that accompanied the announcement, President Trump linked the new ban to the recent attack in Boulder, Colorado.
Right.
He referenced the attacker's nationality identified as Egyptian and mentioned visa overstay issues in that context.
But Egypt isn't on the list, is it?
Correct. It's worth noting, as the details we have point out, that Egypt is not actually included on this new list of 19 restricted countries.
That's a notable point of contrast highlighted in the material, yeah. Now, obviously, this isn't the first time the Trump administration has implemented travel restrictions like this. How does this new policy compare to the 2017 travel ban?
It's certainly a similar policy mechanism, no doubt. The 2017 ban, you'll remember, initially targeted citizens from 7 predominantly Muslim countries.
I remember the controversy.
It faced extensive legal challenges, went through several versions, before a specific version was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court back in 2018. That policy was eventually ended by President Biden in 2021.
Okay. So what are the key differences this time around based on the information we're looking at?
Well, the new proclamation is described as broader than the 2017 version, both in the number and perhaps the diversity of countries included.
Broader how?
Just more countries overall, 19 versus the initial 7. And a significant addition to the list this time, one that wasn't on that initial 2017 list, is Haiti.
Haiti. Okay, let's maybe zoom in on a couple of the specific countries that seem to get particular attention in the details provided. Haiti is one of them. Why was it included according to the proclamation?
Okay, Haiti. The proclamation cites Haiti for high visa overstay rates, like we discussed.
Right.
Also, large numbers of people entering the U.S. illegally, and a lack of a central authority capable of providing necessary law enforcement information.
So multiple factors again.
Yes. And the available information we have also notes that during the campaign, there were some controversial claims made about Haitian immigrants. And the proclamation itself apparently contains specific claims about hundreds of thousands of illegal Haitian aliens.
Okay.
Now, a counterpoint mentioned in the information is the fact that approximately 200,000 Haitians have been granted temporary protected status, or TPS.
Which allows them to be here legally, right?
Correct. It allows them to live and work legally in the U.S., typically following disasters or other extraordinary conditions back in their home country.
So the information provides the administration's stated reasons, but also includes that relevant context about the Haitian population already here under TPS. What about Afghanistan? Its inclusion also seems to have drawn some specific reactions.
Afghanistan, yes. It's included for reasons related to vetting and documentation. The proclamation cites its lack of a competent authority for issuing reliable documents.
Okay, the vetting again.
Deficient screening and vetting measures, and also high overstay rates. Now, the policy does include an explicit exception for Afghans on special immigrant visas, SIVs. These are generally individuals who work directly with the U.S. military or government.
Okay, so there is an exception for SIV holders. But despite that exception, there was still notable criticism reported.
Yes, very much so. Groups like #AfghaniVac, which focuses specifically on resettling Afghans who aided the U.S. mission, they strongly criticized the decision.
How so?
They're quoted in the sources as calling it a moral disgrace. They argue it's a betrayal of Afghans who risked their lives to support U.S. efforts, especially given, the ongoing situation in Afghanistan after the U.S. withdrawal.
Yeah, that's powerful criticism.
And the information also points out that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, recently terminated temporary protected status for Afghanistan as well, effective May 20th.
Wow. Okay, so that context is definitely important for understanding the reaction there. What about Iran? It was on the previous list, wasn't it?
Yes, Iran is included again. It's cited in the proclamation primarily as a state sponsor of terrorism.
Okay. Are there exceptions mentioned for Iran?
Yes, similar exceptions are mentioned. Existing visa holders are generally okay, and there's mention of individuals coming on special visas, for example, for persecuted minorities.
Got it. And the other Middle Eastern nations on the list, Libya, Sudan, and Yemen, they were also mentioned earlier.
Right. These nations are included for various reasons, too, including those vetting concerns and links to terrorism we discussed. The context provided in the sources highlights that these are nations facing, ongoing civil strife, war, or significant territory controlled by opposing factions.
Which complicates things like central authority and documentation.
Absolutely. Sudan, for example, as the information notes, is currently experiencing an active and quite devastating war.
Yeah. Okay, so given the scope of these restrictions affecting 19 countries, are there any broad groups explicitly exempted from this new policy? Who doesn't this apply to?
Yes, the proclamation does detail several explicit exceptions. Big one. U.S. permanent residents.
Green card holders.
Exactly. If you are a lawful permanent resident from one of these countries, this ban does not apply to you.
Okay, that's crucial.
Also, athletes traveling for major sporting events are mentioned as being exempted.
Interesting.
And additionally, immediate family members might be accepted, but they need clear evidence of identity and relationship. Something like DNA testing is even mentioned.
Wow, DNA.
Yeah. But the core policy primarily applies to foreigners from these 19 countries who are outside the U.S. and do not already possess a valid visa as of that Monday deadline.
Okay, that clarifies who it targets. Now, policies with this kind of reach, they inevitably draw significant reaction and criticism. What kind of responses are highlighted in the material we have?
Well, as you might expect, the announcement has drawn widespread condemnation, particularly from international aid groups and refugee resettlement organizations. They've been very vocal in their opposition.
Any specific examples mentioned?
Yes. There's a quote from Abby Maxman, the president of Oxfam America. She's quoted as stating that the policy is not about national security. It is about sowing division and vilifying communities. Pretty strong words.
That is strong. What about reaction from inside the U.S. from lawmakers?
Democratic lawmakers are mentioned as voicing strong opposition.
Yeah.
Figures like Senator Adam Schiff and Senator Ed Markey.
And what was their line?
Reports indicate they stated the ban would not enhance U.S. security. They described it as effectively writing bigotry into U.S. policy.
Okay.
So clearly, very significant differences in how this policy is being framed and received, depending on who you ask.
Absolutely. Okay, let's step back from the specifics for a moment. Why should this announcement matter to you, the listener? What's the takeaway here?
Well, look, this policy has direct implications for international travel, for immigration, and maybe for the overall approach of the U.S. towards global mobility.
Right.
If you, or perhaps someone you know, is traveling from or planning to travel to one of these 19 countries, maybe for work, school, visiting family, or even relocating, this policy is immediately relevant.
Yeah, could affect plans directly.
For sure. And even beyond that personal impact, just understanding the stated reasons which, as we've seen, range from administrative issues like overstays and documentation, all the way to fundamental concerns about national security and vetting and grasping the broad scope of the ban, gives you, the listener, crucial insight into the current direction of U.S. policy in this area.
It really touches on major themes, doesn't it? National security, immigration, international relations.
Absolutely. All intertwined here.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've essentially explored the core details of this new policy. It impacts 19 countries, driven by these stated justifications that include concerns about vetting, visa overstays, and links to terrorism.
Right. And we've also made sure to highlight the significant criticisms reported in the sources, those describing the policy as discriminatory, potentially harmful, and maybe not even an effective security measure, according to those critics.
Okay. So thinking about everything we've covered, drawn directly from that information available, here's maybe a final question for you to consider. When you look at this mix of reasons the administration provides for the ban, from the technical issues like documentation and overstays, right up to the serious claims about terrorism links. And you place that alongside the really strong criticisms that label the policy as discriminatory or ineffective for security. How do policies like this actually attempt to balance national security goals with all those other considerations like international cooperation or, humanitarian impacts?
Yeah, that's the core tension, isn't it?
It seems to be. So what questions does this deep dive leave you with about the complexities of managing global travel and national borders in today's world?